Hi guys, welcome to the Improvement Season podcast. I'm here with my man Pascal, as always. Say hi, Pascal.
Yo, buddy.
I've just screwed this kind of intro up about 3 times, so we got this one down, thankfully. And today we are recording a bit of ahead of time. There hasn't been a whole week that has passed because I'm going to probably be quite busy this weekend. It's going to be my birthday. I'm getting really old. So 28 tomorrow.
28, not even 30, and complaining about it already.
Charlotte keeps telling me to shut up because she is a little bit older than me. But today we're going to be talking about Minicuts. I don't know if we want to talk about our weeks a little bit. First of all, because most of the week has gone. My week's not been particularly exciting. I have just finished my Minicut, so deloading this week and eating at around maintenance, just bringing calories up slowly, which has been really a relief, actually, really nice. And not much has happened for me. I do need to write my next mesocycle up today or probably tomorrow for my next mesocycle, which I'm really excited to get back into smashing cereal and eating lots of food and just hitting new PRs and new numbers. I just love that aspect, and that's something I really missed during the mini cut, where you are kind of just in there to do a job. So anyway, how's your week gone, Pascal?
Yeah, I mean, as you already said, we are recording a little bit in advance, so nothing much has passed ever since we recorded the last episode. But something I wanted to talk about, which I haven't addressed last time, is in regards to my back. I took a more aggressive approach when it came to my deload. So I did take out all the bigger, more strenuous compound lifts, such as the squat and such as the deadlift or the stiff leg deadlift and stuff. And my back felt so much better. So as you guys remember, the trap rhomboid area where it was always flaring up and I couldn't really explain what is causing it. And now that on Monday I implemented heavy squats again, and this is where it flared up again. So maybe it is the pressure on my traps when the bar is sitting on my traps, and I can always feel it in my neck, right? So my neck, the right side of my neck is always a little bit tight, especially sometimes in the morning when I get up, can't really turn my head around properly. So I could imagine that maybe it's not the intense back work and volume of back training, but it's more maybe axial loading and the stress from heavy squats on my traps sitting there, and that makes sense when I really think about it, and all the data I collected over the previous weeks and month, even that I reduced my back volume significantly, and it didn't really change much. It was still present the entire time. And now that I took out the squats only for 1 week, or in general I didn't do squats for 2 weeks in total, and it was kind of gone by then. And then I implemented it or went back to heavy squatting, and then it flared up again. So I hate to say it, but I always have issues over the entire career span with squats.
And I was
my hips, my back, and yeah.
I was going to say, it's been a long time since you've taken out squats or done a variant on the high bar squat for a long time. I know we've spoken about this off air, where I'll probably vary movements a little bit more frequently than Pascal at times. And I think the high bar squat is one of your crutches where you just won't remove it in some ways.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it's just a love-hate relationship, because I know that squats kind of do me well, but in a general sense, it's more so that they harm me in many, many ways. It's like a bad relationship where every friend and family member of yours or people in your environment tell you that your partner is no good for you, but you yourself insist on that the person is the right one for you, right? So maybe that is the case, but it's a good thing for me to notice that, especially, and this is what I already said to myself right now, that for the next gaining phase, I will probably take out the squats and really put an emphasis on my upper body and really just pound my upper back, or just in general my back, with back work. and take out all the actual loading for my for lower body compound lifts. And maybe that will help also get in way more volume for the lats and in general the entire back.
That sounds like a really smart move, considering quads are also one of your stronger points.
Yeah.
Sounds like a move you maybe should have made a while ago. I don't know, but I can see why, because I love squatting as well, and they don't always treat me well.
No, and the thing is that over time you need to analyze what is going on, and this is so important. And I think that's the perfect example for people to realize, okay, over time you actually learn the hard way, but also learn through indicators, looking at the data, looking at how you're feeling. And then this can only show over time. This isn't something you know for yourself after just 6 months of training. This was something I needed to experiment for months or even years now with putting it off, changing one variable at the time to actually really get to know what might be the underlying issue and what might be the cause for certain things in your training program, to understand, okay, this works or this doesn't work, instead of changing everything at once and then just saying, okay, yeah, that worked, but I have no idea why it worked, right? So yeah, and I think that's a perfect example for the people, or a takeaway for the people to understand that, okay, this is something I learned now for myself and I can apply it for the future. And everyone has to find their own way in their journey.
No, I think, and I can completely agree. And I think a lot of the listeners will be able to agree, where they have certain lifts that they just absolutely love doing, but they don't necessarily aid them towards their goals. A big one for, I think, a lot of kind of power builders or guys who have been in powerlifting and getting more so into bodybuilding, like you and me, actually, like deadlifts off the floor for ages. I just had to have those in my program. I was like, I love them. But what I got with deadlifts off the floor is similar to your upper back pain. I'd always just have a lagging, like I'd feel like I was sitting badly in my chair. I thought it was a posture issue. And as soon as I removed them, it was like, my back feels all right. It's like the axial loading just hams you so much.
Totally. It's funny that you mentioned that with the sitting and slouching forward, because that always happened with when I really pound my upper back, and probably more so due to axial loading than due to specific back training. Yeah. And I always then sat at my desk and needed to, I don't know, protract and retract my shoulder blades, because I had the feeling that something isn't sitting right, but it was just the back musculature that was so tight, probably coming all the way down from your cranium, right?
And I guess this is why, for bodybuilding, you can get massive on machines. Like some of the biggest bodybuilders don't squat. Some of them do, some of them don't. But it's super interesting. And I think, especially as you get stronger, and we've spoken about this, like squats just beat the hell out of you to a point at which it's like, this is part of the reason I think low bar squats sometimes aren't the best for hypertrophy, is because not only do they beat you up in all these places, but they actually allow you to load more, and then that beats you up even more. And it's like, is it worth that cost? Like, I don't know. And sometimes I see the same with like, is it worth doing a touch and go bench, or should you go to a pause bench where maybe you use a bit less load, but it's that much safer and you cause that much less fatigue? Same with like a squat. How much of the stretch reflex do you want to use? I can see why when you get very, very strong and your goal is just bodybuilding, you might remove it a little bit or use less of it. It's very interesting, or at least varying things more frequently maybe as you get that much stronger. You can't kind of do them so much all the time. But anyway, that wasn't really our discussion, although I think highly valuable still.
Totally. Most of what we wanted to talk about, and this is a perfect timing because you ended just your mini cut and it was really short, aggressive, like it should be, like a bank robbery, as we like to say, in and out as quickly as we can with the most reward as possible. And just to give the listeners a little bit of overview once again, I think you touched on it last time. You didn't finish it by then, right?
It was my last week that week. Yeah. It was.
Could you give the listeners a brief overview of how it went for you and how long it was and stuff?
So I started, it was 3 weeks in length deficit. So I was eating just over 4,000 calories during my mass, brought those down to about 3,500 during a deload before it. So I kind of tapered them down and then got into a deficit that was at 200 calories. So that was just over 1,000 calorie deficit, looking to lose I wasn't expecting to lose 2 pounds a week. I was just expecting, with all the adaptations that go on, the fact that thermic effect of feeding's down, I knew NEAT would come down during that time just because the body just adapts. So I put myself in what I knew would be a big deficit, thinking that would be over 1,000 calories or roughly 1,000 calorie deficit, hoping for like that 2 pound loss per week, but aiming on average for the 3 weeks for about a percentage loss per week, if not a bit higher. Hoping to lose maybe 2 to 3% body fat. I'd like to think I lost at least 2% body fat over that time. So maybe coming from where I was about 14% down to about 12%. I'd say that was probably a good rough estimate of where I ended up and was starting. I might have been a bit fatter than that at the start, I'm not sure. But yeah, it was really interesting. Over the first week, and actually over like just a few days, I actually started at about 186 pounds, and by the end of the first week I was already down at 180. Now bear in mind, I think the first week at least should be ignored, if not the first like week and a half, 2 weeks, because there's just so much water going on, like moving. You just don't even know. My carbs came down from over 600 grams to just about 200 grams. So it's like, there's a lot of glycogen that's just gone there. You saw it in my face immediately. Lost loads of bloating there. Lost loads of bloating just like around my waist and things, just from that kind of carbohydrate load. And so yeah, lost that. And then basically I stalled out for 2 weeks on the scale. But in my opinion, and this is probably something we can get into, I think once you set your deficit for that mini cut, if it's only like 3-4 weeks in length, you've got no reason to make changes, because there's not enough time to have enough valuable data to know whether you're not going to adapt to a deficit in that time either. So yeah, I just left calories where they were. I wasn't doing any additional cardio. I left steps where they were, so hitting 10,000 a day on average. Weekends kind of very much fluctuate depending on what me and Charlotte do. So I think the first weekend I hit over the weekend 50,000 steps. Then the weekend after that, maybe it was only 30,000. And I think the weekend just gone, it was about 30,000 as well. So I hit quite a lot on the weekend just because the sun's nice. And then training wise, it's just setting off with, I basically keep my training at a same sort of volume as what I would do with the first week of like a mass mesocycle, and then leave it. So I don't add much volume. The only volume I'll get is maybe if I add a little bit of load, maybe get an extra rep out or so. And I will stay kind of 3 reps from failure in that week, and then just each week add a little bit of load. So my reps in reserve might come down as a consequence of adding a little bit more load, but I won't purposely really push progression. I kind of sit a bit. So training gets a bit dull. But what I found is even weeks 1 to 2, the fatigue that built because of the aggressive diet led to basically a sustained performance almost. I was eking out a little bit better performance, but if I was in a mass, I'd be like, this is piss easy. These sessions are I can get them done in half an hour, whereas they'll take me way longer. And when you're in that aggressive deficit, you cannot do pounding loads of volume. And part of the reason I like to now do mini cuts, and this is very much credit to Mike Israetel and Jared Feather and their work in this area, is using it as a bit of a training resensitization in terms of keeping volume low purposely so that you can kind of reduce some of the fatigue that had been building. So when you come out, you can more so find that kind of when you increase volumes, you're getting better responses from it. Probably could structure quite a lot of our conversation over that, but that's kind of generally what I did over the time. We can get into chats of how I handled food, nutrient timing, anything like that, but anything that comes up that's interesting. I don't know if you've got anything you want to add to that.
No, I think that was a really, really great sum up of how a mini cut should look like, in my opinion at least. I brought it up earlier already, the analogy of going onto a bank robbery, right? You want to make it as quick and as smooth as possible and reap the most rewards as possible. And you're not doing a bank robbery often. Right? It's not something you do every second month or every third month, right? And I see, at least right now, because Minicuts became so sexy over the time span of the last 2 to 3 years, they became more popular, more people have heard about them, and more people abuse them, in my opinion. We've touched on it already in an early episode of the Improvement Season podcast, just quickly. Well, I think it was at the introduction of Miguel when he came on board in the live session there. But it's just people use it as an excuse or argumentation to justify their aggressive dieting or wanting to lose as much weight in a quick time span as possible, even though that they aren't in a good place to actually do that. But because there are more and more people and also studies that show that aggressive dieting might be a valid option for some people without any significant loss in performance or muscle mass, people then take that as cherry picking studies for their own good or their own intentions in that regard. And I don't like that behavior. It's like, trying to justify a wrong behavior for themselves. And especially the people who don't have a place in doing mini cuts. And what I mean by that is people who aren't experienced dieters, who aren't experienced trainees, who are new to resistance training and stuff like that. I see it with them even more so than with trained athletes, that they are abusing the mini cuts more so on a frequent basis. Like every second week you hear them, every second month you hear them talk about, okay, I'm planning my next mini cut, right? And they are weighing 160 pounds on 6 feet tall, where it's just like, sorry, dude, but do you even lift? And that's not a 6 feet tall, 160 pounds stage weight, but it's just like straight line in the landscape, right? And they aren't even able to squat 100 kilograms, and they make use of such a powerful tool. And I think that a mini cut is a powerful tool. I'm not saying that mini cuts don't have its place, and I think they are great if used appropriately and in a mature fashion. But abusing it, and that's the case for everything, basically. Abusing these tools is not the way to go. And I have the feeling that too many people actually go down that route and justify it with studies, with articles, and maybe because other people are promoting it right now.
Yeah, I think when we discussed it, I think off air, we talked about it being like an advanced dietary tool. And I think that's a great way to depict it, because I think it is something that's advanced, and it's definitely not something necessary. It is something that can definitely help someone who has all their ducks in a row, understands, they've gone through diets, they understand how to go through an aggressive diet, they've gone through years of training, years of lifting, years of dieting, they understand these things, and they want that little bit of extra that can help them kind of get a bit more out of maybe their massing phases. I think that's what mini cuts are for. And it's kind of similar to, you see people using these like advanced lifting techniques, whether it be like, I don't know, a newbie going for like a daily undulating periodization program, and they're trying to find their MRV and they're getting all lost in the woods, and it's like, dude, just pick some big lifts and linearly look to progress on those for a bit first. Because at the moment, you're looking at the minutia, the advanced stuff. You don't even know how to do the basics properly yet. And actually, they end up cutting themselves back. And the problem is, I think, oftentimes when we're ranking ourselves in terms of like novice, intermediate, advanced, or like hearing an advanced training tool, they think that means better. They think that means superior, whereas actually it means, no, this is just for those people that have to use it or like know how to use it. It doesn't mean like you can get away with not having to go there. And sometimes I don't know, maybe calling it a complex dieting tool would put people off, because then less people would be like, oh, that sounds sexy and cool. But yeah, I often find it's for people trying to justify almost yo-yo dieting, so going through very aggressive massing periods, and then they're like, oh, I'm going to clean it up with a mini cut. and then just like swinging between and not really getting anywhere, whereas that's not what it's meant to be. It's meant to be kind of a tiny step kind of backwards to propel you forwards, whereas they're just doing it to undo damage, whereas it's not to undo any damage, it's just to clean. That's literally all it's trying to do. If you have to undo damage, you need to go on an extended dieting phase. You really do. And something I think is really important is even down to like genetics, down to environment. Like if you haven't got a genetic makeup that is allowing for a quick fat loss, an aggressive fat loss, or an environment, so if you haven't got a stress-free environment, then you shouldn't be going through it. Because I know I've trialed Minicuts with some clients and they just don't respond well to it. They get incredibly hungry very quickly. They get really lethargic, and it's like, you can't actually sustain an aggressive deficit. We need to just go through a slower one, and that's fine. It just means you get there in a bit less time, but actually you're not, because you can't sustain the aggressive one anyway. So this one is more optimal for you, whether or not on paper a different way would be.
No, absolutely. And I think that that's an important note you bring up, because I think it was Danny Lennon who once has written an amazing article on why aggressive diets might be appropriate for you. So Sigma Nutrition, Danny Lennon, check that article out, and I can look it up and put it in the description below. And he brought up the argumentation, and this is something that studies show it as well, that for some people, aggressive dieting might be a better way to go due to adherence, due to motivation and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But most of the time, these are for obese folks, where these hunger signaling and the negative adaptations are probably not as significant and as severe as for leaner trained individuals who are also resistance trainees and stuff like that. So keep that into consideration as well. And it's like you said, when you aren't able to stick to an aggressive diet, you will eventually not get to your overall goal anyway. So why then try or force yourself to try to achieve that with an aggressive approach, rather than taking a more conservative approach that gets you to your end goal like 100% of the time, when this is the right way to go for you. It's like you have two options or two routes to go. So one street crosses into two, right? You stand in front of the aggressive approach, the short approach that gets you to your goal, or the longer goal, right? And because you think, I don't want to walk that long anymore, you're trying to go that aggressive route, but it's a steep hill, it's I don't know, full of shards and monsters and stuff like that, that makes it really hard to get there. And it's not suitable for all the people to make it to the end, and it just always throws you back like in a video game. You're always dying and need to start from the beginning. Try to always go there, right, rather than putting down the difficulty on the level and go down the right route, which is a little bit easier, but you probably end that level instead of always trying desperately to get to the end goal with the aggressive approach. And some people are too stubborn, and I've been there myself. I always tried in a not appropriate situation, such as you already mentioned, where I wasn't ready for it. From a food-focused perspective, from a stress environment, all these kind of things, I wasn't ready for an aggressive approach, but I always thought, I'm ready for that. I have the willpower. I know that I'm able to diet like that. I always failed. I always fell back and started at zero again, whereas I could have taken the easier approach, but I thought to myself, no, I can make that. And I didn't go anywhere. I just spin my wheels. I see so many people being there in that situation.
I have to say, I absolutely love that analogy. I have a different analogy, but I won't say it because that one was way better. And I think it's even to a point of which you only have so many lives, and a mini cut isn't something, if you fail at it, you don't even get the opportunity to die and restart. You need to then take the other route. Like just sack it off, go the other route. And maybe some people have to go down that way and fail to realize that it's not appropriate for them. I think this is a good point to talk about. Maybe do we want to outline what mini cuts are for, who they're appropriate for, or do we want to go down the route of who they're not appropriate for and when you shouldn't do it first?
Maybe not because I think that everyone has heard when you can implement them and what they are good for and all that kind of stuff. But maybe we need to outline our opinion, at least, what for whom they are not the best way, and maybe also in that context talk about the requirements you can set for yourself, such as environmental, such as stress and stuff like that.
Cool. So yeah, some places I'd say it's definitely not appropriate is lack of experience with dieting in general. If you don't have a good number of diets under your belt, then you don't know how to manipulate your food in a way that's going to make this sustainable for you. If you've recently been dieting, so if you're coming into it from a mass or from a maintenance phase, then potentially you're in a good place. But if you're already dieting or you've been dieting in the last few months, it's not time to then start a really aggressive diet. Even if you've mini cut like a month ago, you're not doing another mini cut. That's not where it's meant to be. You should have just done an extended cut before. If you've got a lot of fat to lose, a mini cut isn't for you. If you are already very lean and you're looking to get like super shredded, a mini cut isn't what you need to be using. That's not going to be appropriate in either of those scenarios. And then I think the only other thing off the top of my head I would add to that is basically if you haven't got an environment that supports an aggressive diet, because you have to have all your ducks in a row when you're doing this. You have to, like playing the advanced levels on the video game, you have to have the skills and you have to have the concentration, you have to have the caffeine beforehand, you have to have the walkthrough guide. You need all of that and all your attention, because if you've got holidays or if you've got social occasions, weddings, or if you've got a stressful time at work or children to look after that are going to cause a lot of stress and disruption, now is not the time to enter a stressful diet, because stress is stress, as we know.
Absolutely, and that last point I think is really important for the people to understand. And I see it with a lot of my clients as well, that when we are doing a mini cut, sometimes they then want to participate at a social event on a weekend, and then we need to actually bump up or give them some flexibility. And during a mini cut, it's just, I want the people to actually, because it's just such a temporary thing. This is something you can suck up during that time. Talk with the people in your environment about them. Let them know, okay, this is what I like. And food is a social part of our society. That's absolutely normal. And this is something we have to accept. But if you want to go out each and every weekend with your girlfriend or with friends or anything, then a mini cut is probably not for you. Because then you have to be a little bit more flexible, or at least that should be the case. You are probably maybe even overeating, then not having that aggressive diet, but throughout the weekdays, you are making it unnecessarily harder for you. It's like you said already, it's like kind of a binge restrict cycle, but you're justifying that with a social occasion or putting in some refeeds when they are not really necessary, because you are not dieting since such a long time where it's appropriate or where the body needs, quote unquote, that. I mean, refeeds, we can always discuss about whether it's really needed for people to do that. But from psychological perspective, or when we take the argumentation of glycogen replenishment for future performance, in such a short time frame, it's not really needed. And thus, all you're doing is slowing down your progress and making it potentially even unnecessarily harder for you, because now you have a higher food intake. And now the body senses like, oh, holy shit, there is food now. And you've been quite aggressive over the last days. Maybe you should actually bump up here the leptin and the ghrelin, and maybe you should actually eat some more, right? And I see it with a couple of clients who actually even have problems sticking to their diet in a diet break, a time span of 5 to 7 days even, where we are putting them to maintenance, simply because they have been dieting and the body is actually there, tries to protect you, right? And I think that, yeah, when you want to participate in social life, that's absolutely fine. We're not saying you shouldn't do so, but for a mini cut, that might not be the best approach. Then rather go down the slower or conservative approach.
I think the point is, because it's mini, it's 6 weeks at an absolute maximum. I think anything longer than that, you're just doing an extended dieting phase. You want to make the most out of it time-wise. And that's a part of the appeal for me. I can be like, right, I cut out like really tasty foods, don't go out eating. Although I did manage to fit it in once, but it's really difficult. I found it very hard because you're so used to being if you're doing it right, you're so used to already eating plenty, feeling good, and then you go into it and you're like, oh, I have no food to play with. And you can't be that flexible because you're in such a big calorie deficit. Whereas when you're in a more moderate deficit, you can make allowances for these social occasions. You probably don't even need to justify it as a refeed because you're not all that hungry. Whereas when you are doing a mini cut, generally you're in a body fat percentage that is already fairly lean for you. You're in your settling range, whether you're kind of higher or lower in it, you're still in that range. So you're not kind of way over fat. So you don't need the extended diet, and you do get hungrier quicker because you're at a lower body fat percentage whilst you're in that. So like you said, you just need to have everything tight. So I don't think over that mini cut period, when I was doing it, I was like, I actually was thinking I would be able to fit in like some kind of treatier foods and stuff. I just didn't even want to. I was like, I'm really hungry. I need these high volume foods. I need to have my nutritional timing right. Otherwise my performance in the gym wasn't feeling as good. I need to have some carbs before bed because otherwise my sleep's going to suffer. I definitely found the first few days that transition was really quite tough. And I think once you've experienced that, you kind of get to know it. It's fine, but some people they don't have that ability to stick to that, and that can already send them into the wrong direction. So if another person who probably wants to avoid it is anyone who's had those binge eating disorder type eating patterns where they have really restricted and then binged. If you have that, then you probably don't want to go down the aggressive dieting route. Just take that softer approach, and there's nothing wrong with that at all.
And you also brought up the thing about being an experienced dieter, and we've talked about it a couple of times offline already. And I think that this is such a good point actually to highlight, that when you don't know how you react to a deficit, what deficit you should run automatically already from the get-go, right? That sets you in an aggressive state. If you don't have your habits in check, if you don't know how to manipulate food to keep you satiated, if you don't have your schedule in check, when you are just eating, my breakfast, I don't know, sometimes I eat at 10, sometimes I don't eat at all, right? When something like this is going on, then a mini cut might not be the best option for you, because that will fire back quite quickly, especially when you miss a meal. The body will just immediately react, and you want to stay on track and just execute for the next couple of weeks, depending on how long you're running that mini cut. I myself sometimes like to use it with, just in a general sense, 4 to maybe 8 weeks, but this is only in rare occasions. If I really know that the client is able to pull that off from a commitment standpoint, and also from the willpower, then I do it, but more so 4 to 6 weeks. And during that time, you simply want to execute and have everything perfectly laid out before that, so that nothing else is changing. And when life throws something at you, it doesn't really interfere with you executing that strategy and plan. And I mean, and that all entails being an experienced dieter and know what you're doing when you're in a caloric deficit. And you don't need some time to get used to a deficit or time to understand what is going on, but you're just executing, and also know that the fat loss is happening and stuff like that, right? And I think that's really important, that this is probably not the best tool to be used by someone who's only been dieting for, or has gone through cyclical phases of gaining massing for only 1-2 years or something. But try to first get it in, throw it in when you are, I don't know, it's just a broad and general recommendation, but something like 3 years and upwards, and that you have done these cyclical phases a couple of times properly, and not just fucking around. Like, I did a cut but didn't really do anything, and then I binged a couple of times. that's not what we are talking about, right? But more so like, yeah, perfectly executed cuts, perfectly executed muscling phases where everything is in check. And then, yeah, when the mini cut is around, it's not a question about whether you are sticking to it, but you can only execute.
Mm-hmm. No, I think terrific points. And I don't know if I want to bring it back to maybe the positives of mini cutting, because what we've spoken about maybe is making people think that we're against them or we don't promote them or they're not something that you can use. But to be honest, a lot of the people we coach are people that mini cuts work really well for, because they are more kind of, they've gone through cyclical dieting phases. We've taken them through that. They've got their shit together. They've got a coach. Like that helps a ton. Whereas a lot of people don't have all those tools. So especially, I know a lot of our clients listen to this. We're by no means saying mini cuts are like a bad thing that you shouldn't do. And you've probably had both me or Pascal potentially say to you whether we think they're appropriate for you and your situation. And obviously I've just ran one, so I obviously like them for myself, but I don't always think they are the appropriate tool, which is our main point. But they can be great because like aggressive dieting is popular for a reason, and there are these studies showing it having some benefits for a reason, because you can lose a lot of fat in a short period of time if you can do it correctly and if you can stick to it. Like if you can lose a percentage of body fat kind of across 4 weeks, like you can get from looking fairly soft to looking pretty beach lean, which is excellent, because then you're in a better position to then extend your massing phase. Whereas if you let your body fat levels go up to a point where you then need an extended diet, you're probably spending more time then not massing and gaining muscle and gaining strength. So there's those cons there. So the mini cuts can be really great for just propelling more progress in future, like bringing down the body fat levels so you have more room to grow. That's going to improve partitioning, kind of where does the nutrients go. It's going to go more to muscle rather than fat. That's going to be good. You'll probably also, if you're getting kind of towards a point where you're a bit sick of food, it's going to make you love food again, which can be really beneficial. So you're going to get a lot of those benefits when you come back out of it. Hopefully you also maybe have lowered your training volume a bit. You're not training with excessive amounts of volume, or you're not doing loads. I don't think you're going to be doing that whatever you do, because your performance will just dip. So then you come into a position where you're in quite a good position. Something I would like to bring up is the fact that I see people maybe doing this, and I don't think it's appropriate, where they just go through like bulks, then mini cut, bulks, mini cut, bulks, mini cut, and they just keep going through these phases. And what I want people to realize is that taking periods at maintenance, that homeostasis where the body likes to be, is really good. And I think maintenance periods are quite undervalued, but the body likes that, and it kind of relates to settling points and hormone levels. And if you talk about mTOR and AMPK, like when you're dieting in a mini cut, sure, your training volume's lower, but it's not as low as what you'd have in maintenance. And you're in a calorie deficit, so that is catabolic in its own right. And then when you're massing, sure, you're in a calorie surplus, that's great, but that's also a stress on the body, pushing body weight up. And you're training with really high amounts of volume. So over time, you get to this state where the body's just like, oh, give me a break. And this is where maintenance periods come in. They kind of, like we call them, primer phases. They prime you for future progress. So we do think these need to be dropped in at times as well, because I do see a trend where people are just going to be like, yeah, I'm just going to mass, mini cut, mass, mini cut, mass, mini cut. There become a time where you'll even know in yourself, in your own body, where you just become pretty unresponsive to either. You just are in a state where you need to give your body a break. And I think that's understated, and I understand why. And I don't want people to do too many maintenance phases, and I never want to, but they are really kind of useful tools. And I know, Pascal, you're on the same lines. Like, we both see benefits in them, and we hate doing them, but we kind of know if we want to be, like in Mike Israel's words, like the best athletes we can be, we do them, we suck it up, because they're actually not a step backwards. They're not even a step sideways, really. They are going to be steps forward. Yeah,
totally. And wasn't it Brian Miner who actually said that?
Oh, maybe.
In regards to I think deloads. That deloads aren't one step back, 2 steps forward. It's only a step forward.
Yeah.
right? Only 2 steps forward. And that's so true also in regards to the maintenance phases. Right now, I have one client who's injured since a longer period of time already. We've put him on an isocaloric diet, trying to maintain everything as much as possible. And I always say to him that we are still making progress. Because every single week he's a little bit concerned that he's losing muscle mass, that, I don't know, he's not making the progress he would like to, but you can always use time to work on something and improve something. When you are injured and you can't really train that much, right? Focus on a different body part that you can bring up. Focus on bettering your nutritional habits. Maybe even experiment, try to fit in something, try to see maybe something else that works better for you. Try to optimize your sleep. There's always something that you can work on, because in regards to our progress in terms of to training and nutrition, there is so much more that comes into play, because it's a 24/7 job to actually work on yourself, right? You can always improve in some regard. And I think that the maintenance phases are just the perfect time to actually focus your attention on other things to then improve these habits for future gaining or cutting phases. And so great summary. I don't have anything else to add there. I just wanted to say one thing in regards to why we have been so critically talking about mini cuts at first, and that is just, I think it's most of the nature of our industry. When something new comes out, people, and that seems amazing without any kind of bullshit behind it or something, or like a fad, people jump on it and just take it for granted and don't really critically think about the potential negatives that come along with it. Sometimes we don't even know the consequences, the long-term consequences or the negatives that can occur with that. So sometimes it needs a little bit of time for us to grasp what might be behind it as well, in the sense of negative outcomes in the long run. So, and I think that this happened to the mini cuts. They came out. I don't know who first started talking about that. I even think that they always have been there, but not so in the term mini cut, but more so maybe aggressive dieting, aggressive cut, or anything like that. But they weren't really that present. Right now, when we're talking about mini cut, everyone kind of knows what we are referring to. And there was a time where people just jumped the gun and just took it for granted as if it's the new magic pill. They didn't really question whether it is appropriate for them, what it might cause for them, what it might cause in the long term, whether it has some long-term consequences for them. They just took it for granted and thought that this is something they have to apply for themselves and have to do. Something like, I don't know, high frequency training. When that came out, or that was the thing like 3 years ago, everyone wanted to start implementing high frequency training for themselves. Same goes now with the mini cut. Everyone tries to implement them in some kind of way for themselves, but it's not really the appropriate tool for everyone. And this is why we have been talking about that critically, because we want the people to think about it critically as well, and really sit down and listen to what we have been saying and build your own opinion on that. And really think about that. Maybe it might be true for you. Maybe you know people around you who have been running mini cuts that might be the case for them. And then build your own opinion. And whether you agree with us or not, that's absolutely fine. But also always keep in mind that all the tools we are using have some pros and some cons. And as long as you are aware of these, you can then, and as long as you understand the tool in it for itself, you can make use of it. It's like having a hammer. If I don't know what to make with that hammer, I don't know. I think it's a, I don't know, training tool or something. But actually, it's a tool for building something, right? So understand the tool at hand and how to appropriately make use of it, and also know the limitations to it. And that's all we wanted to actually put out there with that critical statement. Other than that, I think that mini cuts can be a really great and successful to set you up for future success.
Yeah, I think it's really hilarious actually when you think about it. I know there was a time where everyone was like jumping on 5-3-1, and then there's like periods of time where people were doing like HIIT. They were doing a period of time where it was high frequency, squat every day, German volume training, all of these things. It's like none of these are necessarily bad. You just have to put them in the right scenario or the right place, or individualize them to the person. Just like mini cuts aren't necessarily like good or bad, they just need to be appropriate, and that's what we try and do. Whereas people love just, oh yeah, this is good, this is bad, just like foods. They just want foods to be good and bad, just it to be that easy and that simple, but it never is.
And it's funny because you brought up all these programs, and everyone, when they were the trend during that time, everyone was just like, yeah, that's what you need to do, without really thinking about maybe that's not the appropriate way for you. No, everyone was just like, yes, that's the shit you need to do. And right now it's Minicuts, right? Where everyone is just promoting them without any kind of context behind it, and questioning whether it is appropriate or not.
And it's the same, I think, I feel the pain of my Kisratel here with maximum recoverable volume. Mm-hmm. There was a time when that came out and everyone misunderstood it, they weren't using it appropriately, and everyone was just hammering volume, and then people started hating on it because they misunderstood it and they got bad results via it. And then he had to go and undo a load of damage, where he was like, this is actually a ceiling, not like something you should be always striving to train at all the time. And I see it all the time within the fitness industry, where people get things in their mind and they like to pigeonhole ideas, they might like to be dogmatic. Whereas you can make a case for virtually anything so long as it bases around like the principles of science. So yeah, I think we gave this a good discussion. I don't think we needed to do like how to run a minicut, all of this sort of stuff. I don't think we need that. There is an article on the website if people want to learn more about that sort of thing. But I think just the discussion of being able to critically analyze certain programming tools and diagnose whether they're appropriate was a good discussion to have, and I think people will take a lot away from it.
No, absolutely. And it's once again, like you said, that when people want to get an information about how to run a minicut, the information is out there. But what isn't talked about often are the negative consequences that sometimes occur along with that. And I think that it was important that some people start talking about them as well. And I know that Alberto Nunez talked about it somehow at some point.
He had a vlog.
I expected more on actually talking about, like, I don't know, the consequences, or to whom it might not be the best idea and stuff like that. But I mean, it's good that people start also talking about that it's only a tool and it's not the magic pill, and it's not the only thing you need to do, like minicuts bulk. And yeah.
I think my only qualm with Berto's video is people will just read the title and they won't really watch it, and they won't really understand Berto and his opinions on things, and they take it as, oh, Alberto says minicuts just shouldn't be done and they're awful. And that's my then concern, and that's why I hope people listen to this and get a bit of a better understanding of where he might be coming from.
It's so funny because when people talk about, I just have that example in my head, because every once in a while I ask myself whether people actually read the studies or the articles of certain things. And the best example I can bring up right now, because it just jumped to my mind, is the article from Menno Hanselmans on the central nervous system fatigue, right? And when people bring up central nervous system fatigue, they post that article saying that central nervous system fatigue doesn't really exist. And when you really read that article and the studies, you can still bring up that argumentation that it still exists.
Yeah.
And but anyway.
It's because some of them are clickbaity, so like it's what the title's saying isn't actually what the article's saying at all.
Totally.
Anyway, maybe we should title this "The War on Minicuts."
Yeah.
Adding to the war, the battle against minicuts.
Featuring Alberto Nunez to get even more clicks.
Yeah, ft.berto.
Yeah.
Oh dear. Cool. I don't think we've got anything else to really share apart from, Obviously, still pushing for the Mike Israel conference. We have a nice big room to fill out, so we've still got some spaces on the 14th of July for the seminar there, which is super exciting, and I can't wait to get the guys here and just spend some time with them, because they're just incredibly intelligent guys, and you'll be able to shout loads of questions at them. Questions at them and get their response. Try and outwit them. That would be excellent. And they'll be talking everything muscular hypertrophy. Make sure there's a link in the bio so you can kind of access the tickets there. So 14th of July, that's coming up fairly soon now, and that's going to be a special event. It's central London, Birkbeck University, which is near Tottenham Court Road, so it's pretty central. And yeah, we'd love to see more of your smiling faces there. And thank you to everyone who has already.
Or shouting faces.
Yeah, shouting faces. Thank you to everyone who has already purchased your ticket. We're very much looking forward to seeing you. Oh, plug, we've got exclusive t-shirts for that event. So if you do want any exclusive t-shirt that's only going to be available to ticket holders, we're going to be making an order of those fairly soon. So if you haven't got your ticket in time, you won't get a chance of getting one of those.
Absolutely.
We're done.
Yeah, over. It's
I did all the plugging.
Okay, bye.
See you guys.